Instead, the reaction is more on the order of, what do we do with this information? Why are you bringing this information to us? What can we do about it? Why would I want to hear about this? This is a terrible thing for you to tell me.
I imagine that is the case for some people. So the first question I had was, has your work in climate policy altered the meaning of the words resilience and hope, in your opinion? Are these words even in your vocabulary when thinking about climate change? You can be brutally honest.
I think resilience has been overused quite a bit, and part of the reason I worry about it being used so much, and I think I've alluded to this a little bit in class, is that essentially it's saying we're just going to go right back to where we were. We're going to put things right back where they were. We're not going to rethink our relationship to the way we're using the land or the water or any of the other climatically influenced living things and processes around us, right?
Yeah.
We're just going to make it all we're going to bounce back, and we're going to make it the way it was before. We're going to fix it all back.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, part of the reason that we're dealing with climate change already is it's not just climate change, right? It's climate change and the way we have overutilized and wasted water. It's climate change and the way we have destroyed our soils and soil erosion and deforested land and all of these other things. So it's not just climate change. We interact with natural systems around us and with other living beings and in each other. And so to me, the only way you can have hope is that it does provide us with an opportunity to rethink all of these pretty bad decisions that we've made about the way we treat the natural world and each other.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So a good follow-up question to that would be, with your encounter with the Navajo Nation, what moments of resilience did from them in times of struggle or despair? Because the native and indigenous knowledge of land management is more superior than the Western understanding of nature.
Well, I would say one of the problems, one of the most frustrating aspects of the way indigenous people live today is a lot of the land tenure issues that they have inherited through colonialization has made the situation much worse.
Right.
The amount of land that they occupy and what lands they occupy are a result of that history. And so that has really curtailed a lot of the traditional practices that could be utilized and had a big impact on their ability to practice traditional knowledge. That said, one of the really, I think, empowering and really gratifying experiences is to just take the stories that people have about their land and about their land's history and put them all together and look at them as a whole.
Yeah.
And have people recognize that their own stories actually do matter and that they really do have something to say about, and not only something to say to each other, but something to say that's really powerful about the conditions of the world that we're living in right now. So, for example, over the 20 years that I was in the federal government, we spent many, many years in discussions with tribal elders about the changes that they had experienced in their lifetime as part of an assessment process. And when I took that results back to the community, there were people within the community who then said, aha, so I wasn't just imagining things. I haven't been, people, this stuff that I talked about as being, part of the way things were in the past. But look at how many other people saw the exact same thing.
Yeah. All right. And in the chapter reading for understanding climate change adaptation, there's a lot of mention of the uncertainty surrounding the nature of the climate reports, including the IPCC models. It seems as though they are suggesting that policies formed in real time as changes are observed. Does that uncertainty leave you feeling neutral, pessimistic, or optimistic?
Well, the way the policy is slow. It's very slow, and it's taken a long time, and part of that is the IPCC process itself. Okay. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change started when James Hansen really went to the Reagan administration and said, hey, we really, really have a problem. We have to do something about it now. And they said, let's find an international body to study this.
Yeah.
So the whole process, essentially what happens is all of the authors get together and they look at the state of knowledge about climate change. And there's, the different working groups, like how many greenhouse gases are in the atmosphere, and what does that say about the warming trajectory?
Right.
And then the working group 2, which is all about what kind of impacts we're seeing, how much are people adapting. And then there's working group 3, which is what are we doing to mitigate greenhouse gases?
Right.
So all of their reports depend on what's in the scientific literature, how much of it agrees, and then putting an assessment together, which takes about 4 years. At each stage, actually the IPCC committee decides what the outline is going to be for the report before any of the authors are even nominated.
Wow.
And of course, they're a governing body from the UN. So the UN ahead of time votes on what's going to be in the outline. And then the governments, like all of the heads of state from around the world, have to agree to that. So they agree to what questions get asked first.
Oh, no. That's very biased.
Then we write furiously and work really hard on making sure we have everything nailed down and the relative certainty and everything. And then we have to send it right back to the governments. And then if they don't like something in there, they can vote it out.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that they don't necessarily agree with the topic being part of the report. So, for instance, I wrote a report on adaptation, and I talked about some of the problems with seawalls and levees.
Yeah, learned about that a lot.
And how they're not always effective, and how sometimes they can actually make flooding worse.
Right. Yeah.
Got pulled right out because so many governments use seawalls and levees. They don't want to hear that kind of thing in the report. Mixed.
So there's no metric or standard just for wellness. It has to be based off money.
It really depends on the policies from within the individual governments and what they will agree to. So it's all voted on by governments. The process is super slow.
Yeah.
The whole issue of sea level rise was extremely controversial.
How?
Because some of the reports didn't agree. Some reports were coming out saying sea level rise is going to be much, much faster than what you are suggesting.
Okay.
Because as the planet warms, there's this feedback loop where we get less polar ice, more warming, more heating of the ocean. The ocean is going to expand.
Right.
And that is going to also absorb more heat. And it is going to drive the melting of polar ice caps in a way that becomes accelerated over time. It will not be constant. It's going to speed up dramatically. And the amount of sea level rise we're going to get over time is much, much higher than what you guys are putting in the report.
Wow, okay.
And it eventually did get changed But there isn't even a lot of talk about that. And the fact that sea level rise is going to be really pretty fast.
Thinking more along the lines of some governments were like denying sea level rise was a thing. But the pace of
it's the pace of change that really is the trouble. Yeah.
Well, do they do anything at least to address the issue, or are they just like, no, it's going to be this rate versus that rate?
Well, what happens is the report's revisited every 4 years. And so the updated report in 4 years did revise the numbers upward.
Wowie. Okay, that's pretty terrifying.
It is terrifying because what happens is you end up with a really conservative report.
Yeah.
This is like the bare minimum of what we're going to see for impacts.
Yeah.
We'll take it as, oh, this is what we should expect, rather than this is the minimum of the impacts we should expect, and we could probably expect a lot more. And so what happens is, the report comes out, and then the media goes crazy saying, wow, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, over time, they begin to notice, oh, this is not what it was actually projected. This is way above that.
Yeah.
And that's why.
Yeah, that is so terrible. Because I was thinking when they mentioned uncertainty, it might mean that there's space for mitigating things so it's not as catastrophic as you outlined. But I guess that's not the uncertainty they were referring to.
Well, actually, in some cases, that's true too,
really?
Right? Because there is this hope, and I think it's really stressed in the report, this hope that when a report comes out, that's really going to compel people to come together and do something.
Yeah.
Take action.
Okay.
But that action, even, the amount of time it actually takes for greenhouse gases to decline in the atmosphere and for the changes to take place, we're talking decades.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not a real rapid change backwards. And with CO2, it can be multitudes of decades, especially now that we have, 420 ppm CO2 in the atmosphere or something like that. It's ridiculously high.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, what compels you to stay working in this field despite the odds piled against humankind?
It's like I said before, you can't, it's either that or just crawl in a hole somewhere and pretend like you're not alive. I really feel like there's not a whole lot other things that I should be doing right now, but trying to get people to think about their future,
right?
Their future and their kids' future, because it's something that is a message that is not getting out.
No,
but this is now, and this is your kids, and your family. It's not, maybe grandpa won't have to worry about it too much.
Yeah.
if he's going to be around for a year or two longer, but if you're young and want a future, you've got to think about it. And think about what you're going to do and be prepared.
Right. Well, that's a really honorable thing to say to a young person. I really appreciate your responses for the interview. It's really enlightening. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I have a quick favor to ask.
Yeah.
Can you please resend the I think it was the Pacific Island assignment? Is that the one you have missing?
I think so. Yeah, I'll go ahead and send that through once I find it myself.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everything. It's been just so much fun taking your class and learning about this stuff. It's pretty frightening.
Oh, good. How is the other class?
Oh, I haven't cried yet.